Confession time. When I was little, I used to absolutely hate running. So much so that I used to pretend to faint in order to get out of it. My mom used to take me to this place in Moorpark, California that used to be a river, but like most things in California, it dried up. And she'd make me run laps around this dried up, non-existent river. Man, was my 13-year-old chubby self miserable, dragging my feet across the desert sand. I used to think of every possible excuse to get out of there. You know, I had to use the restroom, my knee hurt, I had a headache, I had to use the restroom again. Till one day, my mom had enough of the excuses, and she unleashed the wrath of a single mother on me. And that day, for whatever reason, I was feeling a little lightheaded. So as my mom was unleashing on me, I ended up fainting. Next thing I knew, I woke up in my mom's arms, and her tone had entirely changed from angry mother on steroids to worried mother in tears. And that was the moment, ladies and gents, I reached the age of reason. From that day on, I knew exactly what I needed to do to get out of running and get away with anything and everything. So, anytime my mom's tone of voice would start to change, I would just pretend to faint. When in danger, play possum. It was a foolproof plan until it wasn't. Needless to say, it got old after like the 5th time I did it, and mom caught on. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because this was all happening in my first year in the United States. The year that I had discovered the many comforts the richest country on earth has to offer. You know, air conditioning, fast food, having a car, that white, fluffy, pre-cut toilet paper that you don't have to work too hard to rip. You ever notice that? Side note, toilet paper in Eastern Europe, where I'm from, is like parchment paper. You literally gotta like wrestle with it to rip off a piece. But anyway, I was trying to cling on to and savor these many newly discovered comforts in my life. Little did I know and understand that comfort is the pill we like to consume, which slowly but surely leads to the loss of purpose, drive, and appetite for our own lives. As Michael Easter so eloquently puts it in his book, The Comfort Crisis, we're living progressively sheltered, sterile, temperature-controlled, overfed, under-challenged, safety-netted lives. Yikes. And in this age of unprecedented comfort, we are collectively undergoing an epidemic of despair, with depression, anxiety, addiction, and suicide rates at a record high. Suicide is a leading cause of death in the US, with 45,979 deaths reported in 2020. It's about 1 death every 11 minutes. Furthermore, advancements in technology have allowed us to stay in contact at virtually all times, and yet nearly 50% of Americans report feeling lonely. These are the harsh realities we must recognize and face today. So, how do we navigate these uncharted territories? How do we get out of our comfort zones, intimately reconnect with ourselves and each other, and reverse engineer success in our lives? Before I give you that answer, let me first give you the backstory. In the early summer of 2005, a very strange and unpredictable American man by the name of Jim Krause flew to a small developing country in Eastern Europe to meet 3 strangers: me, my mom, and my sister. That's us looking all adorable. He had met my mom online, and they had chatted for a few months before he came to visit. Now, to give you an idea for why this was such abnormal behavior for this man, he will literally drive 45 hours from Los Angeles to New York to avoid getting on a 5-hour flight. He absolutely despises flying, and he was somehow in the United States Air Force. Don't know how that happened. But anyway, he flew over 20 hours from Los Angeles to Chisinau, Moldova to meet 3 strangers he had only known online. He came to visit during his birthday week, so as he walked through the doors of our little Soviet apartment, we naturally decided to impress him by singing happy birthday in our atrocious, broken English. I was playing piano in the back, and my mom and my sister were holding some version of like a homemade Moldovan cake and singing, "Happy birthday to you." And Jim just stood there, frozen in the doorway. And that was how we met. That's us and some of the first pictures we all took together. 6 months later, Jim brought us to the United States. He raised me and my sister like his own. He gave us a new life, the life that I'm blessed to have today. He is the man I call Dad. A little over a decade later, in April of 2017, my real father hung himself from the ceiling of an abandoned building with no one around. It took them days to find him. I attended his funeral, I grieved, and I asked myself, how did Jim become the most important person in my life? And the man in the casket was a complete stranger to me. I reflected on the successful life my dad, Jim, had been leading, surrounded by people he loved and who loved him, and my biological father who took his own life because he decided it was no longer worth living. I asked myself, how did these two men have such vastly different trajectories in their life? And it dawned on me. My dad chose the challenge. He did the most uncomfortable thing one could possibly imagine. Got on a 20-hour flight to a foreign land to meet 3 strangers. My father chose the comfort. His comfort lied in his daily routine of visiting the liquor store. My dad chose people. He chose me, my mom, and my sister. My father chose the pill. I had to come up with a P word here, otherwise the whole thing would fall apart. But I digress. My father's pill of choice was alcohol. My dad chose contribution. He decided he would do whatever it took to bring us to this country, give us a new life, raise me and my sister like his own, and give us the best education he could so we would make something of ourselves. My father chose consumption. Daily, consistent, unapologetic consumption of the pill that became the central part of his life. A black hole that consumed all purpose, all meaning, and eventually my father with it. That is how my dad built a successful life, and my father crumbled under the weight of his own life. Success, as author Earl Nightingale defines it, is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. My dad's worthy ideal was changing 3 people's lives, and he progressed towards that ideal with every conscious decision he made. Consciousness is defined as the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings. I realized that my dad was conscious, awake, and in control of the decision-making in his life. And my father was unconscious, asleep, and not in control of the decision-making in his life. I call this the cusp of consciousness. And it's that sense of control and conscious decision-making that determines which side of the spectrum one falls on. Let me give you an example. In the book, Man's Search for Meaning, Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote that one of the most powerful contributing factors to a prisoner's survival in a concentration camp was his ability to retain some sense of control by making conscious decisions whenever possible. Although the guards would take virtually everything from the prisoners, their clothes, their belongings, their loved ones, their dignity, even their sense of identity, some prisoners still chose to maintain even the tiniest sense of freedom by making small decisions whenever possible. For example, some of them would choose to give up their bread to a fellow prisoner, even though they were just as hungry. But what that allowed them to do was consciously choose to live in accordance with their own values, hence retaining that sense of control. Crossing the cusp of consciousness requires the freedom to choose the challenges, the people, and the contributions that make up a worthy ideal worth living for. On the other hand, comfort, pills, and consumption deteriorate that freedom over time. My father and my dad lived opposite lives. My dad became the example, and my father became the warning. And this powerful dichotomy became a clear roadmap. I realized that if I simply interchanged these factors, I could reverse engineer success in life. Let me show you how. Research shows that our core psychological needs are satisfied not by staying in our comfort zones and daily routines, but by the insertion of challenges and novelty in our daily lives. In other words, a key factor that is directly correlated to living longer, happier lives is the ability to consistently vary what we do and how we do it. Another element that is directly correlated to living longer and happier lives is the ability to maintain good, strong relationships. In fact, studies show that being lonely can shorten your lifespan by up to 15 years. That is the equivalent of smoking a half a pack of cigarettes every single day. And in 2019, the US government declared that we're facing a loneliness epidemic. So what are we replacing human interaction and interpersonal contribution with? The consumption of our pill of choice. Nowadays, we have a lot of pills to choose from. It's not just substance abuse anymore. To give you an idea, the average person spends 11 hours and 6 minutes consuming digital media. That's from smartphones, audio, TV, and computers. No wonder we're feeling lonely. In fact, statistically speaking, 50% of this room is currently experiencing a lack of connection. Perhaps a lack of personal challenge, or maybe even contribution in their life. So turn to the person to your left and give them a little tickle. But let's reverse engineer this, shall we? It takes an average of 66 days to form a habit, according to some experts, but I know that most of the people in this room are overachievers, otherwise you wouldn't be here watching a TED Talk on a Friday afternoon. So for all of my overachievers out there, let's go with 90 days. For the next 90 days, I challenge you to reverse engineer success in your life following this roadmap. It'll be a simple challenge, not an easy one, but if you stay true to it, it will change the trajectory of your life. For the next 90 days, each morning, take out a notepad, split the page in half, and on the left-hand side, write down a comfort you'll exchange for a challenge that day. It should be simple daily habits, a hot shower for a cold shower. Trust me on this one. Your morning coffee for a nutritious morning smoothie. Some of us coffee addicts are going to fail day one on this one, myself included. I can already see some people in this room. Sleeping in for a morning run around a dried up, non-existent river, whatever floats your boat. Write down a pill you'll exchange for a person that day. Fast food for your significant other, because inevitably your health affects your relationship. Money for you, for example, right? So stop chasing the money and choose to spend time with yourself, your thoughts, and the things that fulfill you. Write down a consumption you'll exchange for a contribution that day. In other words, consumption of social media for a call to a friend who you know could use a good talk. And as you get through each day, ask yourself, what is your pill? We all have a pill. If you're human, you have a pill. It may be a substance, cannabis, alcohol, sugar, tobacco. It may be a dependence you developed, maybe digital media, Instagram, Netflix, your favorite video game. It may even be a limitation or an excuse you continually feed yourself. Workouts are just not for me. I'm not a morning person. I keep to myself because no one understands me. Listen to yourself and stay conscious of those internal conversations. Because it's the choices that we make each and every second that shape our lives. Should you stay quiet in that meeting because that's what you're comfortable with? Or should you challenge yourself and speak up because perhaps somebody could learn something from you? Should you listen to that top 40 song for the second hour in a row? Or should you call a family member to tell them you appreciate them? Should you binge watch another Netflix show? Or should you research what it takes to give a successful TED Talk? What choice would lead to a more vibrant life? What choice would lead to a more fulfilling, successful life? What choice would allow you to cross the cusp of consciousness and stay awake for your life? To give you a relatable visual, think of the movie Matrix, the scene where Neo wakes up, pulls out the cord, and unplugs himself from the Matrix. That's what crossing the cusp of consciousness should feel like. And remember, it all starts with a choice: the blue pill or the red pill. In our case, the pill or the person. Because the truth is, our journeys are paved with the micro decisions we make each and every second. We must pay attention so we can move with intention. To quote Matthew McConaughey, we don't live longer when we try not to die. We live longer when we're too busy living. Thank you.